Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading. And thank you for subscribing to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I am your boy, 12 Kyle. Man, check this out. On this episode, what I want to talk about is OG status. I have, and I'm not really sure when it happened, but I have reached OG status. Now, let me explain what this is. I can't even remember when it started, but like I'm on social media a lot. I remember one day I was on Twitter and, I'll be honest, there's a lot of younger people who follow me on Twitter. And it was one of the young homies. I think I was talking about hip hop or something like that. And they said, "Hey, man, I appreciate you, OG." And I was like, I looked around because I'm like, me? OG? Like, because here's the thing. An OG, in my term, and back in my day, was what you called, well, it was short for original gangster. And so it was with, so you associated OGs with, street culture, hustler culture, and of course, gang culture. And I'm none of those three. Definitely not street, definitely not culture, and definitely not, hustler, and definitely not a part of a gang. Shout out to the Bloods and the Crips. No problem with y'all. So yeah, it kind of took me by surprise, but what I found was that I was being called an OG in reverence because of my age and the fact that I kind of spewed a little wisdom or game, if you will, quote unquote game. Shout out to Uncle Dolomite and Too Much Game podcast. Make sure you check him out. That's my boy. He gives game every week. So yeah, for me, it was like, okay, I guess I'll be an OG. But at the time of this recording, I'm 51 years old, right? So what I did was at that particular time, and like I said, this may be about 4 or 5 years ago, I just really kind of learned to accept and appreciate the OG status. Because honestly, everybody doesn't reach OG status. And I've learned to embrace it. Now, there's some that will call me Unc, like short for uncle. And then there's some of the younger generation, they call you, when you're older, they call you old head. Like our middle son, Cameron, who's 21 at the time of this recording, he's in college. He calls me, he's like, "Dad, you're just an old head. You think like, you sound like those old heads." And I explained to him like, "Son, at some point in time, in the not so distant future, you will be an old head too." And, many, 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 many years from now, when he's married and he has a child, a son, his son will call him an old head too, and I'll be a grandfather. So, it is what it is. But I've learned to embrace OG status. It's something that I don't take lightly because I feel like I do have some wisdom to give, younger people, and not just younger people, but just people in general. But yeah, just being called an OG, I thought was kind of cool. Like, because again, I'm not street, I'm not a hustler, I'm not a gangster. So like to be called an OG was pretty cool. But yeah, I've reached OG status. And I think, one of the things that you do when you reach OG status is that you take what you've been through and you take some of the things that you've learned and you pass them along to those who haven't gotten to that point yet. And I think you're actually doing people a disservice if you don't pass on the game to them, if you don't tell them like what it is that they're going to face. For me, my father and my uncles, they were my OGs, if you will. Well, not really OGs because they were old. They were older, but and even to this day, my dad and my uncle, they still pass on wisdom. But growing up, I would say that. But then I also had like, some older cousins. Like my cousin Mike, he would be like my OG. My cousins Mark, Scott. Male cousins, my cousin Tammy, my cousin Tara, rest in peace. who were older than me and put me up on game and put me up on a lot of stuff just as far as life is concerned, right? So I think when you have people like that in your family or you have people around you like that, I think that's beneficial because we all need an OG. We all need several OGs. And here's the funny thing, and I mentioned earlier about the younger crew that follow me on Twitter. There's at least, I can think of 5 young men and 2 young ladies that have reached out to me via direct message and sought some wisdom on something, life situations or anything. Hey, what do you think about this? Hey, I'm thinking about doing this with my career. I'm thinking about going over here. I'm thinking about moving. You tell me what you think. Not that I'm here to just shovel out advice, but, they trust an OG because I've seen a few things. Lived through the 80s and the 90s. And so, and I'm not going to say I came out unscathed because I don't think none of us come out of it unscathed, but I think I took something from those years. And so to be able to pass along that kind of wisdom, I think is paramount. But I will say this much. In reaching OG status, there's some things that I learned along the way, and I'll share a few of those with you. One of the things that I learned along the way of becoming an OG is to find something or someone to laugh at every single day. Listen, there's nothing better than laughter. And if you can find something or someone, because sometimes all you got to do is turn on the TV or go to social media to find somebody to laugh at. And then sometimes you can laugh at yourself. I mean, self-humor is everything. But if you find something or someone to laugh at each day, that's something that you should do. Laughter is good for the heart, it's good for the soul, and I like to laugh. So if I could find something funny, whether it be a meme or a person or just a situation, I mean, and I tell people this all the time, like, you guys, if you follow the podcast, you've heard me talk about my crew. My crew. These dudes are so funny that, like, for as big as this podcast is, or maybe isn't, their jokes for me would be about the podcast. Like I might say, it's, the pod's going okay. Oh man, you think, and it would start like, you think da 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 da. And it's always something funny and it's something that I can laugh at, even though I'm trying to downplay the success of the podcast. Like, I have my crew of friends. I always say this, like, I could win $100 million lottery, right? And they would still have jokes for me about the time that I fell in the mall trying to impress a girl. Like, I mean, like, just because, like, you have done something, that doesn't mean anything. You still can be the butt of a joke. We've got running jokes for like 30 years. And that happens when you have, close friends. And I have, the crew is right there, and, the best of friends and everything like that. But those guys, especially and here's the funny thing, like, we have a group chat, but we don't talk every day. We talk in the group chat every day, but we don't talk on the phone every day. And so during the pandemic, we said, okay, well, hey, we'll do a conference call at least once a month, and we've kind of slacked off on that. But when we do the conference call, man, we're on Zoom or whatever, and I literally have to take an aspirin before the call because I'm gonna be laughing so hard till, like, that little thing in the back of your head starts hurting. Yeah, that type of laughter. And so I think when you can laugh like that, when you can have fun, when you can find something or someone to laugh at, I think you're doing fine. Another thing I've learned as an OG: never settle, never be content. Let me say that again. Never settle, never be content. That is one thing you learn quickly as an OG, because, like, you know the success that you've had. You've seen the success that you've had, but you don't settle for it. Like, and no matter how good the job is, I'm not saying, like, if the job is good, you should be looking for another job. No, but also understand too that, the job, depending on how good it is, it should pay. and your pay should commiserate with your talent. And if you're not being paid what you're worth, then hey, it's time to find something else. Or at least go to them and say, hey, I need more money. And so even in success, I don't think you should ever be willing to settle. You know, content is something that I kind of struggle with. And I'll be honest, because I don't ever like to get content, no matter how good things are. Like, things can be going well. And it's not like I'm expecting something bad to happen, because I don't. But it's just like, what? I just never want to get content, because when you get content, I think you get complacent. And who wants to be complacent? You know what I mean? Like, so it's just being content was one of those things as an OG. It eats at me. So I never want to be content. I never try to rest on my laurels. I feel like I still have something to prove every day, whether or not it be work, whether or not it be here at home, or it's out in the world. I got something to prove. And whatever it is I have to prove, I'm going to prove it to myself first. That's OG stuff right there. That's legendary OG stuff. Another thing I learned as an OG, and an old OG told me this once: every relationship and every friendship requires work. Let me say that again. Every relationship and every friendship requires work. So it doesn't matter if you and Tommy haven't talked in 5 years. Whose fault is it that you and Tommy haven't talked? You could sit there and say, well, hey, my phone number hasn't changed. And he could say, well, hey, my phone number hasn't changed. But at the end of the day, if that's a friendship and it's important to you, you have to make it work. You have to work to make it work. And it's no different from your relationships, whether it be your relationships with family members, relationships with your parents, or relationships with your siblings, or relationships with your significant others. It all requires work. And I say that as a married man, but also I'm a married man that has friends and family members. And so, yeah, if you want those things to work, you got to work at it. And you have to put in the time and the effort. And of course, if you don't see somebody's putting in the effort that you're putting in, naturally you're going to fall back a little bit. I think that's only natural that someone will fall back. But at the same time, it takes two to tango. So I think if you show that you're putting forth the effort, then more often than not, the person that you want to make that better with will do the same. But now, if they're not willing to work, then it is what it is. And as an OG, I realized that a long time ago, like, relationships and friendships are work. It's not necessarily hard work, but it can be work, particularly if you're not willing to put in the time. So be willing to put in the time. Another thing I realized as an OG is that, like, particularly as a father, I'm not sure if you guys are parents, but for all my parents, you're Superman or Superwoman in your kids' eyes. Period, point blank, right? That never changes, no matter whether or not your parents are here on earth or in heaven above. They're always superheroes. Now, at some point in time, in your kids' eyes, your kids kind of realize that, kryptonite does exist and that you are a human being. But for the majority of their life, they view you as a superhero. And, it's important to keep that in mind, because they're always watching. Always. Even when you think they're not watching, they're watching. They're watching and they're taking notes. And honestly, if we're being real, when it's time for them to become parents, they're probably going to be a lot like how you were. I mean, unless you were just a terrible person. But then again, they might be. If they grew up and they saw you drinking and abusing drugs, they just probably will do the same. If they saw you beating up your significant other, they'll probably do the same. If they saw you getting beat by your significant other, they'll probably do the same. Learn behavior. But keep in mind that, yeah, you're still Superman or Superwoman in your kids' eyes. And I think most people view their parents like that, even when they're no longer here. And they can be flawed, or they can be seen as flawed, or, having issues. but it's still Superman and Superwoman. So kind of got to treat it as such. You know what I'm saying? Those are just some of the few things I learned as being an OG. Ultimately, I think what I want to share with you guys too is recently, I had a friend, she asked me, she said, how has life changed after 50? Right? It was a great question. I hadn't even really thought about it, but I explained to her like a couple of things happen. One, you realize that at 50, you probably have more days behind you than you do in front of you. Now, again, I mentioned I'm 51, so I plan to be here another 50 years, right? So I'm teetering on that line, but I probably got as many days in front of me as I had behind me, but I don't know that. So the objective for me to live life to the fullest every single day. Yeah, you're going to have ups and downs, but you got to live life to the fullest every day. But in turning 51, I realized that because I have almost as many days behind me as I do in front of me, time is of the essence. I don't have time to waste time. None of us do. If we're being honest, we don't have time to waste time. And so when you develop that mindset, you're like, okay, whatever's got to get done, I'm going to get it done. Or whatever I don't have time for. And that could be people, that could be a person, that could be a job, it could be whatever. If I don't have time for it, I just don't. And it's just that simple. And you're very selective about where and what you invest your time and your energy into. Because I'm going to tell you something. Particularly after you reach 50, your energy is different. I'm not even going to lie, my energy is very different. Not necessarily bad or good, but it's just different. One of the other things I've learned as an OG at 50 or 51 now, one of the key things I've learned more to do is to say no. And when you're an OG, you don't have to justify why you got to say no. And it's funny because it's like, I remember I was chilling one day and the doorbell rang at the crib. And it was somebody selling something. And so I walked, I looked outside, saw who it was. And I was like, so I opened the door. He's like, hey, I was like, you the owner of the house? I was like, yeah. And he was like, well, I want to tell you about this. I was like, no. I mean, like, he didn't even get started. He's like, you're not interested? No. And I think because I said no, like, people are used to you trying to, particularly salespeople, they're used to you trying to kind of dance around. Well, let me think about it. Or, no. Let me not waste my time and let me not waste your time and your breath. No, I don't have to explain anything to you. I'm an OG. Now, if I was 25, I might have sat there and entertained him. If I was 30, I might have said, well, hey, that's pretty cool or whatever. No. I wasn't rude, but I'm an OG. OGs, you don't have to just, I mean, like, as someone who probably spent some time in their lifetime trying to please people to some degree, oh, that stops when you become an OG. You realize, like, no, I'm not here to, I mean, I want the people around me to be happy, right? I want the people around me to enjoy me and my company. But I'm not here to cater to others. It's not what I'm here. You're an OG. When you reach OG status, you don't move like that. You just don't. I'm not saying that you walk around telling everybody to kiss your ass, but at the same time, like, you're very, very selective as to what you do and who you do it with. But yeah, I told her that. I was like, look, I just, that's one thing I think. And another thing about reaching OG status is that, like, your level of focus is turned up a notch. So you're focused on whatever you're focused on. The focus is laser sharp. I mean, like, I can honestly say there's things that I'm focused on now way more so, and this podcast being one of them, way more so than I've ever been before in my life about any other thing. Or maybe, well, I won't say every other thing, but some things. And I think maybe that's partly because like you just think like, at 25, you got a bunch of time to get stuff done. No. I'm on the back 18 or the back 9, if you will. Nah, I don't know how much time I got. God willing, again, 51 more years here. But I don't know that. But I tell you what, I'm going to go and do everything that I want to do, how I want to do it, when I want to do it, where I want to do it, in that time frame, in my time, on my time, with the people that I want to do it with. And I think that's important. But no, once you reach OG status, you don't have to you don't have to cater to people. You don't have to take stuff off of people. You just don't. I mean, like, because you realize like, nah, I ain't on that time. And if you did, let's just say that you did at one point in time in your life. Nah, I ain't on that kind of time now. I'm an OG. You got to respect the OGs. So, I think one of the things that I've learned over this period of time is that, like I said, being able to embrace it, the lessons that I've learned, the things that I carry with me and the wisdom that I impart to others, I think that's important. But it's also important not to lose me. Because at the end of the day, I got me. And the reality is you are the only person that you'll never leave. Honestly. And you came here alone, you're going to leave here alone. Hopefully you'll make it to the pearly gates. Some of y'all ain't gonna make it, but that's another story for another day. But ultimately, no, I sincerely enjoy being called an OG. I don't excuse me, I don't mind being called Unc. I don't even care about being called an old head, but I'm definitely an OG. And I was inspired when I saw the cover art here. The cover art, as you're looking at it, on YouTube. For those of you watching on YouTube, thank you for watching. I was actually in this picture. I was on a flight, and no King Germ. It wasn't a private plane. King Germ is stupid. Shout out to King Germ from Pod and Saved Our Marriage. Check out his podcast as well. I was on a flight from Minneapolis to Atlanta. And I took that picture, or maybe somebody took the picture of me. I said, take a picture of me. And I was like kind of chilling, looking out the window, thinking. And it was like 8 feet of snow on the ground. And it just always takes me back to this picture. And it's like, that was a young G. And now I'm the OG. So I had to choose this picture for this particular episode. But nah, it's, in conclusion, I mean, being on OG is cool. I don't mind being called an OG. I actually wear it with a sense of pride, a sense of accomplishment, and also a sense of understanding who I am, where I'm going, and what I want to do. And as an OG, I think you have to be an example too at the same time, because again, people are watching. People who especially like being an OG now and being able to reach people, like there's somebody that's listening to this episode in China. There's somebody that's listening to this episode in the UK. I don't know nobody in China. I don't know nobody in the UK. But they're going to listen to this episode like, yeah, that's my OG right there. And my boy Baylor, shout out to BTG for President, is podcast. Baylor the Great, his podcast. He always says, like, I'm the big brother that you never knew you had. You never knew that you needed. And I appreciate that. That's one of the greatest compliments you can give someone. And that's what being an OG is about. I don't have to necessarily tell you what to do. I could just give you a jewel here or there, and you kind of go with it. But ultimately, I think it's important that I impart information. And I think everybody's not worthy of your information, but those who seek it, give it to them. And as an OG, it's your duty and your job to make sure that you get the point across. Because somebody gave the game to you, it's only right to spread love. That's going to do it for me. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for checking out this edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast. The podcast drops every Thursday at midnight. From time to time, we drop bonus episodes on Sundays at midnight. If you're on YouTube, go to YouTube. 12 Kyle podcast is on there. hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the notification button so you can get all the notifications when the episode drops. We have audio and visual for every episode. Leave comments too. Love comments. I love reading comments. If you're on Spotify, you can listen on Spotify and leave a comment on Spotify as well. We're also on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, anywhere you get your podcast, that's where you can find this podcast. If you're on social media, it's 12 Kyle Podcast on Twitter X, Threads, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok is 12 Kyle Podcast. And if you feel so inclined, you want to throw a couple of dollars our way, throw them. I'll catch them. I promise. I'm a wide receiver. Hit us up on Cash App, $TWELVEKYLE. And also in the description box, you can check the link for merch. That's right. We have 12 Kyle Podcast t-shirts, hoodies, mugs. Shout out to my man, Lamp. Lamp donated to the show on the Cash App. Shout out to Lamp. Salute to Lamp. And shout out to the homie Rodis Live Podcast. Rodis dropped, he actually bought a t-shirt. So shout out to Rodis as well. I appreciate anybody that supports this podcast. Thank you for listening again. I am your boy, 12 Kyle. I'll catch you guys next time. 5 G's. Cheers.